The sun set in Cinderluff, turning the dusty main street an angry copper color. Heat still clung to the ground like a grudge, and the wind carried the dry scent of sweat whiskey and horsed folks. Said there was no justice this far west, just debt dust, and the deals men made when desperation took over. Inside the Silver Lantern Saloon, cigar smoke and mean laughter filled the air. Lena Harrow stood on that platform, 23 barefoot, her plain cotton dress wrinkled and stained from the dirt road, her auburn hair tangled over her shoulders, and her gray eyes, once full of mischief and song, now dull and weary. But she stood tall, her jaw clenched tight. If she was going to be sold like cattle, she'd be damned if she looked like a frightened lamb. Harrow the blacksmith played a long hand and lost $2,700 in debt to Mr. Red Tuller. Now a deal's a deal, and Tuller's been real generous offering to settle by taking Harrow's daughter off his hands. Some men chuckled, others licked their lips. Lina scanned the room, not one friendly face, not one outstretched hand, until she found him. He sat in the shadowed corner of the saloon with a lantern light, didn't reach leaning against the wall with Elias Kane, didn't come to town for supplies and silence. But something about this auction rubbed against his bones like a blade on bad. Memories when he saw the girl up there, her face set like a carved stone. Something stirred, something old, something broken. The bidding began $50. Someone shouted 7585 from the sluggish eye man. 100 roared. A rail-thin cattleman with more missing teeth than present Red Tuller sat smugly by the bar, his gold pocket watch gleaming like a promise of power. He nodded once. 200. That was a lot of money for one girl, even for Tuller. Everyone knew what he did with the girls he bought, and the ones that lived long enough stopped smiling. Skip lifted his hand. 200 going once. 300. A voice from the shadows sounded like thunder, turning heads. Elias Kane stood slowly, dust dropping from his coat, his eyes frigid like spring ice, and the Rockies locked with Lena's, who didn't understand what she saw. Tuller's face clouded. You have no business here, Kane. I got cash, Elias said. 300 says the girl walks out with me by going into his coat and throwing a thick roll of dollars onto the floor. It's a free market, ain't it? Elias added. Or are we only allowed to sell women to demons? Now there was a ripple in the crowd. Half laughter, half unease. Red stood, his bulk vibrating under his vest. You making a mistake, ancient man. Elias didn't blink. I've made worse, Sold Skip shouted, and grabbed the bills like they could vanish. Elias came up to the platform and offered his hand, but Lena gazed at it like a serpent. Where are you taking me? She asked, voice hoarse. Somewhere quiet. She hesitated, but the crowd was murmuring, and Red's men were swaying in their chairs as if praying. Lena took his hand and walked down, but Tuller stopped their route. That ain't legal, he muttered, nostrils flaring. I have a deal with her father. Elias's hand slid to the Colt 44 on his hip. The room froze again. You going to argue the price? Red? The silence was deafening as Elias led Lena through the swinging saloon doors and out into the cooling evening air. The stars were just starting to bloom above Cinder Bluff behind them. The whispers began, and the hunt wasn't far behind. The wind outside the saloon carried the scent of sagebrush and dying heat. Elias took Lena to a horse, tied to a hitching post outside the old local store without speaking. Is that your horse? His name's Cutter, Elias replied stubbornly. Seems we got that in common, she murmured, arms crossed over her chest. He loosened the reins and adjusted the saddlebag. I ride, you get up behind. You planning to drag me off like some sack of potatoes? Lena stayed. No, Elias responded. You want to walk with me, but I'd recommend putting some miles between you and Red Tuller before nightfall. Lena looked back at the saloon's windows, flickering with lamplight and danger. Then she swung herself behind Elias, arms hesitantly around his waist. He nudged Cutter into motion, and the horse began a steady trot out of town, hooves rhythmically. Against Lena shifted uncomfortably. Where are we going north? After 20 minutes, the town lights had faded, devoured by the gloom. Elias, my place is about 6 miles up Old Trapper's Cabin River runs nearby. You live alone? No wife, no kids. Elias paused, had a puppy once. Lena frowned. Always this friendly? No. He answered, you always this mouthy for someone ready to be sold like a side of beef. She stiffened behind him. You paid for me that don't make you better than the rest of them. Elias didn't turn, but his shoulders tightened. I didn't buy you, he said quietly. I stopped something worse from happening. The moon crept higher, casting silver light on the prairie. A coyote howled long and low. Lena spoke again, softer. Why'd you do it? What's one more girl to a man like you? Elias dismounted and helped Lena down. Cutter drank from the water while Elias pulled a flint and a few sticks from his saddlebag. You cold? He asked. She shook her head, but her arms betrayed her. She sat cross-legged on a flattened grass patch with a blanket about her shoulders. Elias crouched across her feeding. Twigs to the blaze, back in the saloon. She muttered, you've made worse blunders. I was a scout with the cavalry, fought Comanches Lakota folks. They never taught us to understand thought. I was doing good till Wounded Knee. She blinked, you were there. I was. I read about it, all those people, he nodded, slowly men, women, kids, the brass. Called it a necessary action, I call it. After that, Elias took my horse and headed west, figuring I couldn't fix the world, but could keep it from getting worse where I was. That brought you to Cinderluff, which brought me to a cabin on the edge of nowhere. Cinderluff was the nearest place to buy coffee and bullets. Lena's eyes reflected the firelight, so you're not a bounty hunter, a gun for hire. No, then why'd you walk into that saloon tonight? Elias looked at her, and for the first time, his expression softened because he reminded me of someone a long time ago. She didn't make it. Lena didn't speak, but she understood something now. He wasn't saving her out of duty. It was regret, raw and festering, driving him forward. She looked into the fire. I don't even know Lena Harrow. They shook hands like strangers. At a funeral sleep, if you can. He said we ride again at first light. Toller won't let this go easy. She nodded, pulled the blanket tighter, but as Elias kept watch beneath the stars rifle across his lap, both of them knew something darker than night was already following their trail. The fire crackled low, casting wavering shadows across the rocky ground. Lena lay with her back to Elias, the blanket pulled up to her chin. Elias didn't stare at her, red doubt Toller's mean. But he ain't stupid. He won't send his boys charging blind into a man with a rifle and nothing to lose. That's you, the man with nothing to lose. He didn't answer right away. I lost most of it already, he said finally, just trying to make sure I don't lose what's left. Lena sat up slowly, arms wrapped around her knees. Elias gazed over her placid voice, yet something brittle clung to it, changing him. But when the debts piled up and Toller came knocking, my daddy looked at the floor and said nothing that hurt worse. Elias said nothing, letting her speak on her own terms. I used to think if I was clever, if I kept my head down, Elias thought it was a good dream. It was her voice caught now. I can't even read half the books I brought, sold most for food. The rest are probably kindling in some saloon stove. She laughed bitterly. I don't even know what I am anymore. Elias shifted, tossed another stick on the fire. You're still breathing. That's more than a lot of folks I've known. That's not the same as living. No. He said it ain't. She looked at him across the flame. Why'd you really save me? He met her eyes, no evasion. This time there was a girl named was Miriam. Lived near Fort Wallace. Back when I was stationed there, her pa ran a dry goods store. She was smart, bright, like morning. Lena listened, drawn in by the change in his voice, gentler, almost reverent. She used to come by the barracks, bring books, read. To the wounded, even the dying, said. It mattered having someone care enough to say the words out loud. What happened to her? She went missing one summer. Sheriff found her 6 days later, bad shape, said some traveling men grabbed her on the road said. It was quick. I never believed that Lena's stomach tightened. I tracked them, Elias said, but didn't tell anyone, just saddled my horse and rode out. Took me 3 weeks, but I found them. 3 men too died that night. Third died the next morning. Lena stared. At him. You killed them. Wasn't hard. Wasn't clean neither. I buried Miriam after took her home. And I left the army. Couldn't wear the blue no more. Lena leaned forward. What am I to you? Elias shook his head. No second chance. I didn't save you to save myself, he said. I saved you because you needed saving. A log collapsed in the fire, sending sparks into the night sky. Lena rubbed her arms. I don't know what happens next. We head north. There's a ridge I know hard to track through. I got some supplies stashed near the old mining trail. Lena mumbled to the stars. Maybe I'm not done yet. Elias, reclining on his saddle, muttered back. You're just getting started. By dawn, the prairie sky had changed from velvet black to a pale aching blue, and Elias and Lena rode in silence as Cutter's hooves steadily crossed the brittle grass. After nearly 2 hours of riding north through scrubland and shallow ravines, the world felt vast empty, and Watch Elias finally slowed the horse and pointed beyond the cottonwoods with his chin tilted. Squinting, Lena saw a faint trail up the hill, barely visible in the thinning morning mist. At the crest was a squat log cabin nestled against the rocks, with a stone chimney and a lean-to beside it. Smoke should have been rising from the chimney, but it wasn't. Elias didn't answer, so he jogged Cutter up the last stretch. Lena smelt. A sharp scent in the airwood smoke, but it wasn't the comforting crackle of a morning fire. When they reached the top, her breath caught the cabin had been burned to the ground. Only the chimney stood like a tombstone rising from a bed of blackened rubble. Charred beams jutted from the wreckage like broken ribs. The lean-to had collapsed, and what little furniture was inside was now ash and twisted iron. A scorched skillet lay near the doorframe, its handle melted into a puddle. Elias dismounted slowly, staring at the ground. Lena slid down behind him, her boots crunching on soot. I'm sorry, she whispered. Harassly no, Elias answered. They were here. She saw a torn scrap of red cloth caught on a broken post, Reduller's men. She said Elias stood brushing soot from his fingers, his jaw clenched, so tight she could see the muscle jump near his temple. They wanted to send a message. Well, she said. Message received. He looked at her. Then this was all. I had Lena didn't flinch now. You've got me, that counts for some. Leona crossed her arms. What do we do? Elias looked west towards the hills. We go to the mine's old claim. I worked a few years ago and still have a stash of supplies, ammo, and a few things worth keeping. After that, he looked down at the ruins of his home. We make them regret ever light in that match. A gust of wind scattered ash through the air. Lena reached down and picked up a half-burned photograph of a girl in a white dress smiling. Elias stared at it for a long time. That was Miriam, he murmured. Elias led the way on foot. Cutter, trailing behind with saddlebags full of salvage supplies. Lena followed, close rifles slung across her shoulder, eyes constantly scanning the ridgehill. Lines by mid-afternoon, they reached a clearing surrounded by tall pines. Weathered timbers jutted from the earth like broken bones, remnants of an abandoned mine shaft. At H, he handed Lena one of the pistols. You'll need this. She weighed it in her hands. Feels heavier than I thought. They always do. They spent the next hour reinforcing the shed with old beams and stones around the base. It wasn't much, but it would hold against the wind, and maybe more as the sun dipped behind the hills. Elias lit a small fire in a pit outside, while Lena cleaned the pistol under his direction. Still unsure but steadier. You ever shot before? He asked. PH taught me some. He said, used to shoot at cans behind the shop when he was sober enough to stand. He said shooting at cans ain't the same as shooting at men. I know. She regarded him. I don't need your protection, Elias. Let me learn how to do it. He studied her face dirt, smudged, tired, but fierce all right. He said, we start tonight. He walked to the tree-line and set up 3 rusted tin cans on a flat rock. About 20 yards out back at the fire, he handed her 5 bullets, loaded. Lena fumbled. The first time, but Elias didn't rush her. Breathe, Elias whispered, slow and deep. Squeeze, don't pull. The first shot missed wide. The second hit the rock below, and the third clipped the top of a can, spinning it. She exhaled. Surprised, Elias smiled barely. They practiced for another hour, until the stars came out and the fire burned low. When the cans were dented, Elias gave her a water flask. You'll do okay. You really think Tuller will come all the way out here? She asked. I'd bet my last dollar on it. What's he want with me so bad? Elias didn't answer right away. He stared into the flames. Tuller don't like being embarrassed. He said finally, and you walking out of the saloon with me in front of all those men. That was humiliation men like him. Abuse is about control, lose that, and they start to unravel. Lena nodded slowly. Then we make sure he doesn't. They froze when a distant sound cracked. Elias dropped his rifle and motioned for Lena to extinguish the fire, which she did quickly and silently. They crouched behind the tool and heard a branch snapping and lantern light cutting through the trees. Elias whispered 3 riders within. 50 yards. Lena drew her gun. He observed her hand shaking barely. You don't need to be brave, he added. Just aim true. Elias fired back, dropping to a knee. One of the lanterns went flying. A man cursed loudly in the dark, and Lena fired twice, missing once and hitting bark. Her breath was ragged, her eyes wide, but she didn't run another shot from the trees. Elias threw one attacker off his horse. The other 2 detached their hooves, and they went into the darkness. Lena stood chest-heaving, smoke curling from her. Pistol, you all right? Elias inquired. She nodded, looking proud yet grim that they weren't done. Lena wiped sweat from her brow. Then we better get ready for the morning sun seeped through the pines, spreading long shadows over the area. A bird glided across a tree before disappearing into the clouds. Elias checked the fallen riders. Pockets as Lena reclined against the shed, arms folded. Recognize him? She asked. Elias nodded slowly. Name's Jory Finnegan, hired gun, used to run with the Hammond gang out of Missouri. Disappeared a few years back. You think Red? Tuller hired him. I'd bet on it. Lena exhaled sharply. He sent mercenaries after us. He's getting desperate. Elias pulled a folded note from Jory's coat, opened it, scanned it quickly, and held it out to Lena. It was a crude map of a path from Cinder Bluff to the abandoned mine site, marked with an X. They retrieved the girl, killed the tracker, and buried the body at the edge of the clearing. Her voice low. You said you used to be a scout. Ever cope with treachery? He glanced at her dark eyes. More than I'd like. Why? Because someone sold us out, and I want to know who, and scratched his jaw. Lena stiffened. You think the sheriff's working? With Tuller, no, but someone close to him might be, as if summoned by their words. Hoof. Beats echoed down the trail. Elias sprang up, rifle in hand. Hold your fire, a voice shouted. It's Calloway. Sure enough, the sheriff rode into view, his hat low against. The sun and a dust trailed behind him. Jesus, Calloway said as he dismounted. Y'all look like you've been through hell. Elias kept shooting. What are you doing here? Sheriff heard from a stagehand in Cinder Bluff that Tuller's men were moving and thought you'd be their target. Calloway frowned and said, I think someone close to you did. The sheriff's gaze hardened. I don't like accusations. Kane, but I get it times like these trusts are rare. He reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a thick ledger found in Tuller's office, hidden under a false drawer. Names, dates, payments, and one in particular that caught my eye. He flipped to a marked page and handed it to Elias. Lena leaned over his shoulder. reading silently $1, $200. Harrow details Elias Kane's movements. Elias gently closed the book. I'm sorry. Lena shook her head. No, he was drunk weak, but I didn't think he'd sell me out to men like. Taller Calloway removed his hat, wiped his brow. I didn't want to accept it either, but the records are clear. He sold me before he gave me a chance, feeding Tuller names for months and settling debts with blood. Lena looked aside, fists clenched. Elias walked towards her. This isn't on you. You're not your father, she glanced up, voice shaking. Then why does it seem like his actions are still dragging me down, because that's what family does? But also what? We fight for rising above. Calloway cleared his throat. One of Tuller's men was caught fleeing with sealed letters for a Laram judge. Someone's shielding him from higher up. Elias's eyes narrowed. So this goes beyond one saloon thug. Calloway agreed. Therefore, in order to finish this, we can't go. Lena moved forward and said, We stand. Elias nodded as the sun set behind the hills. Lena and Sheriff Calloway stood over the map, spread across the ground, as the wind whispered through the pines. But they weren't listening to nature's hush. They were listening to strategy, to rage at history that refused to stay buried. If we hit him, Elias said, tapping his finger on the hand-drawn layout of Cinderluff. Calloway nodded. He runs most of his business in the back. Girls, ledgers, smugglers, it all leaves. Lena stared at the map, jaw set, and the auction, when is it? 2 nights from now? The sheriff said same time they tried to sell you. Elias looked at her. You don't have to come. I wasn't asking for permission. She met his gaze. There are 3 girls on that list, one of whom is 13. If we wait, Elias stared and nodded slowly, all. Right then we do it together. He rode hard through the night and arrived at Cinderluff before morning. The town was quiet except for a hungover rancher's cough and the clink of alcohol behind the saloon walls. Elias placed the horses behind the livery, examined his rifle, and adjusted the strap across his chest. Lena loaded her handgun with steady hands, wearing a wide-brimmed hat and a borrowed duster to hide her form. She looked like a wartime outlaw. Calloway squatted beside them in the alley, his tin star dimmed by dust. We'll hit the front while you 2 loop the rear through the kitchen entry, where a servant door is. Possibly. Elias nodded. Red sleeps upstairs above the saloon room with the red curtains. No guards, always 2 or 3, but they can't fast. Elias half smiled. I hope you're right. They walked ghostly through the alley in the early morning gloom. Back entrance to saloon opened easy, no lock inside. Kitchen smelt of oil and rot rat droppings, coated counters. Lena swallowed hard. Charming place. She whispered. Elias motioned for silence. They crept down a short hallway past the storerooms to the back parlor. Voices drifted from beyond the swinging door. Got to keep the merchandise quiet. Can't have another Kane mess on our hands. Another voice grunted. Heard. He's dead. Shot up north. Lena looked at Elias, and he gave her a small nod. Elias grabbed his collar. One chance. The man spit blood upstairs room. 3 Tullers locked him in with a guard. They left him groaning on the floor and charged the stairs, 2 at a time at the top. A guard appeared, shotgun raised. Elias fired before the man could breathe. Room 3 was locked. Lena stepped forward, kicked hard once, twice. The door cracked open. 3 girls huddled inside, eyes wide, faces pale. You're safe now, Lena said, voice gentler than it had been in days. Come with us. The man flinched and dropped his pistol and raised his hands. Easy, Kane. We can make a deal. No more deals. Elias growled. Sheriff Calloway appeared on the stairs. Deputies behind him. Tuller, he said coldly. You're under arrest on charges of trafficking, conspiracy, and attempted murder. Red hissed. You'll never attach it. Lena watched it all unfold, heart pounding. She felt no triumph, only relief. It was over. Or so she thought. They should have seen it coming, as Sheriff Calloway snapped iron cuffs around Red Tuller's wrists and The girls were led gently down the stairs by a constable. A sound cracked through the morning air, distant hollow like thunder rolling over dry hills. Then came the shouting R. Tuller's man Elias cursed under his breath. He wasn't bluffing, he had backup waiting. Calloway shoved Tuller to the floor and drew his revolver. Everyone to cover, locked those girls in the storeroom. Second door on the right. Lena grabbed the nearest girl, barely 13, shaking like a leaf, and helped her towards the back. Elias followed, rifle in hand. Shots rang out before they reached cover. Bullets punched through the saloon's front window's glass. She inquired, "What about you?" Elias checked his ammo. "I'll be on the porch. That's where they'll try to force entry." Lena grabbed him. "Don't die out there." She received a stern smile. "I'll do my best." Tuller's soldiers fired from roofs and alleyways outside Cinderluff, creating a dirty halo around the rising light. Elias crouched behind a broken water trough and fired, knocking one rider off his horse. Another fired from the other end of the street, causing him to duck behind. The saloon door flew open, Tuller's final ace in the hole. Two more men burst inside, pistols blazing. Lena fired before they could turn. Her first shot hit the lead man in the gut. He dropped to his knees, groaning. The second flinched, but kept coming. She fired again. Missed. Elias burst in from behind, taking the second man down with, "You all right?" he shouted. "Yeah, outside." Silence followed shooting, but not peace, Sheriff. Calloway limped in via the rear, hat torn, 2 fallen, 4 taken, 3 escaped west. "It's over." Elias stared at the girls in the storeroom, and then Tuller laughed low and ugly, still cuffed and bleeding from a split lip, leaning against the bar. "You think you've done something here? Think you've stopped all this?" Calloway walked over. "And you're done, you idiot. You want names?" Tuller smiled with bloody teeth. "Start with the man in the mirror, Kane. You think this is about justice? No, this is business. And someone in your bloodline was collecting a share." Lena stiffened. "What the hell does that mean?" Elias stared at Tuller. "You're lying," he said. Tuller sneered. "Asked your daddy, asked Judge Owen Kane. He knew about all of this, helped set it up. His name's in that book." Elias tightened his jaw. "He's dead." "No," Calloway answered gently. "He's in Laram, still on the bench." Lena looked at Elias. "What do we do?" Elias holstered his weapon. "When we finish what we started, the ride to Laram was long and silent." They left Cinderluff behind at first light, the girls placed under protection with the deputies. Tuller locked in a transport wagon, and Sheriff Calloway leading the charge towards something much deeper than back alley justice for Elias Kane. By midday, IE's buildings were taller and its people cleaner, but the corruption just wore better shoes. As they approached the courthouse, Elias felt a weight in his chest heavier than any gun he'd carried. He had come here years earlier as a soldier and son, but now he was a reckoner judge. Owen Kane's second-floor room smelt of ink, sweat, and quiet misdeeds. Calloway led the way, pushing open the doors without knocking. The judge looked up from his desk, eyes wide. Aya stepped forward slowly and deliberately. "Hello, Father." The room froze in the breathless tension between them. The judge was older and stooped, but still had the arrogance of a man who'd never heard no. "What is this about?" he demanded defensively. Sheriff Calloway threw the ledger onto the desk, shaking the inkpot. "Page 32. Elias remarked. The judge stopped, opened the book, and examined the page. He didn't dispute it. "I did what I had to do. Finally, this territory required order, resources, influence. You sold children." Elias growled and said, "I kept the court funded. I paid debts. I kept you fed. I didn't ask for blood money." The judge's face crumbled for a moment, then the mask returned. "Do you think this land survives on prayers and good intentions?" He snapped. "Frontier boy, we're the law because no one else will be." "I came here to murder you," Elias said. But that's too easy. Calloway moved forward. We've got enough to make formal charges. The Pinkertons are on their way. We'll make sure it sticks. Judge Kane went to Elias again and asked, "You think this makes you better?" "No," Elias said. "It just makes me clean outside the streets of Laram," bustled, unaware of the rot being cut out from its heart. Lena waited by the horses, watching him. Approach. Her eyes asked the question before her mouth. "Good, is it done?" He nodded. "It's starting to be." They mounted up side by side, so she said, "What now?" "We go back, start over." Elias looked east, then north. "There's land for sale out near Horseshoe Ridge, good grazing, quiet," Sheriff mentioned. They rode out without looking back, the courthouse shrinking behind them for the first time in years. Elias. Kane wasn't chasing ghosts, and Lena Harrow wasn't running from her past. They were building something new, slowly and painfully. Together, in the West, that was as close.